Okay, we should be live. Please let me know in the chat how the sound is. And also, please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. I'm going to get a drink. I've been wrestling a toddler for hours, trying to get her to go to sleep. So I apologize for the late start, but should be a good one. It's going to be a fun one, I think. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to discuss this week because honestly, I haven't had that much time to prepare for it because I had the flu. I really got sick. I know I said I was getting sick at the end of last week's stream. I really got sick, guys. I was probably sicker than I've been in a long time. But I am feeling much better now, and we're gonna have a fun stream. So then I saw a clip of somebody on Joe Rogan. I'm not going to show the clip because every time I show anything from Joe Rogan, I immediately get like a strike or whatever it's called, a copyright hit. And so you can look it up, but Joe Rogan had someone on. They were discussing the shape of the Earth. Maybe we'll look at it and risk the copyright later. Uh, but this is something that is a topic that is very contentious, and I remember it when it first became a kind of a renewed phenomenon in like 2016-ish, and some friends of mine were talking about it, and it really became much more popular. And I know that there's a whole universe, there's a whole world, no pun intended, of flat Earth content, and I am not somebody who watches any of it, so I don't know. I know there's like basically flat Earth celebrities, and I don't know any of them. But we're going to talk about what sentient singularity theory has to say about this issue, kind of, or what how it can help us understand how to think about this issue, and how it can help us understand the issues that have been revealed by this issue, actually, by this debate. And I think that it's a very serious debate, actually, not because I care so much about the shape of the Earth. I really don't. We'll talk about it and why it probably doesn't have a fundamental shape. It might appear to be flat when you're in it, and appear to be a sphere when you are outside it, looking at it. And we don't talk about the Earth like that. We say on Earth and off Earth, but it's probably more accurate to say in Earth and out of Earth. I think that probably was more common many years ago. That a much more common way to speak about it, but because it was thought of as a realm, a place where this was our home, a place where we lived. It wasn't thought of as a rock, and it's now thought of as a rock. And I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, but the way that we think about it matters. And but what this debate really has showed me, and what I find actually fascinating about the debate, is that it has revealed the biggest problem with our education system, that is such a big problem. It is a complete failure. It shows that people have forgotten how to think. That's what it reveals. And it's so much that is so much more important than what the shape of the Earth is. When you leave it, and something that most of us will never do, most of us have never done, and it shouldn't be, held. The shape of the Earth should not be worried about as much as it is. But the real problem that it has revealed, which is a huge problem, it's not just a debate that people get engaged with, is that people do not know how to think, and the majority of people who engage with this topic, which is pretty much everyone that I know, because of school, almost everyone that I know does not think about this issue. They regurgitate what they've been told. And I'm not here to promote any shape of the Earth. if you're familiar with my work with sentient singularity theory and familiar with where physics is going, the perspective of an observer is much more fundamental and is dictatorial of the perception of space, which really means like the emergence of and conceptualization of shape. Okay, space is matter, you know. So it's very much dependent upon your perspective and even your goals on how you view a shape of a territory. I guess I don't want to say of a world or of a planet or anything, because it's I think that this applies to much more than just, you know, planets. It's like this has to do with reading a map. This has to do with navigating, orienteering, if you've ever done that, where you go out with compass and a map and you have to find your way. I am very good at that. I had to take a course about it in high school, which was kind of cool. But if in a consciousness first, or a sentience first, observer first metaphysics, which means things come from beings. Not beings do not come from things. Things come from beings. Things are perceived by beings. They are conceived by beings. They are defined by beings. Beings are not defined by things. You are someone. You're not defined by any physical structure. You're defined by something much, much more fundamental and much deeper, which is, you know, the presence of a self-referential information system, which is someone, and that's much more fundamental than shape. The shape of the earth, the shape of a rock, the shape of the moon, whatever. But we are going to talk tonight about like what we can look at to try and determine how we should think about the shape of certain structures, including the earth and the sun and the moon, in specific contexts, and how to approach this issue in a way that is actually relevant to our lives, actually helpful, and actually thinking. The reality with thinking is that you will not always be able to get the answer if you don't have access to the information that you would need in order to know the answer. You can think about it properly and not get the answer, or you can not think at all and just assume an answer. And that's really what people have done. Unless you are an astronaut, basically, you should not be stating with such conviction that the earth is a sphere if you've never seen it firsthand. And that's what sentient singularity theory really can help us understand, which is how to think. And when you are truly thinking, you are putting first person first. You are prioritizing firsthand experience and the information that you gain from it above secondhand information. As I said before, if there's a pot of water on the stove and I tell you that it's cold, but you stick your hand in it and it burns your skin, who should you believe? Your own senses that are telling you that this is, you know, scalding water, or should you believe me because I told you that it was not hot? What if I have a PhD? What if I wrote that it was cold in a textbook? What if I wrote in a textbook that it was cold, and then somebody else wrote a textbook based on that textbook, and somebody else wrote a textbook based on that textbook, and then somebody taught it to you and they had a PhD? Like, should you believe them then? No, not necessarily. Like, I'm not saying don't believe them, but recognize the limits of your ability to truly know something. Because by recognizing the limits of your own personal experience. And that's what we've lost in this debate. Most people will say, will basically speak as if people who believe that the Earth is flat as if they're morons. And the reality is that everybody who does that, unless you're John Glenn, it's like the only person I've ever met, I think, that is an astronaut, and who we can assume has seen the Earth from outside it, is of the people that I know, or not know, but have met. I remember meeting John Glenn as a kid. I don't even know why, but I mean, I guess he's an astronaut. I went to public school. That's probably enough of a reason. Nothing against astronauts. I think aerospace tech is so cool. I have like models of my favorite planes over there, and I know a lot. I know a lot about what is said about aerospace tech from even modern SpaceX rockets to the Saturn V and the Gemini missions and the Mercury missions. I was a total aerospace nerd. Still am. So that's the way that I approach this. I'm not somebody who's totally uninterested in the issue of orbit. I'm quite interested in the technology of flying in a plane, which is a flat plane, and also the technology of going to orbit. And I've seen rockets. I've seen SpaceX rockets launch and in person. And I've been on a plane like probably all of you. But that's the limits of my firsthand experience. I've never been to space. I've never left Earth. And so I'm assuming that nobody listening to this is an astronaut. Because if you are, you're probably not interested in this debate in the first place. But even then, you probably should be, because of what it reveals about the issues involving our education system and how it has basically trained us not to think. And it is a fascinating issue, this specific topic, and also the other another topic of which is going to the moon. Did we go to the moon? And I will say this: I think we went to the moon, but two of the smartest people that I know, who are two of my closest friends and even mentors in life, do not believe we went to the moon. And they're brilliant people. Not doesn't mean they're right, but what's interesting is that this issue, both these issues, the flat Earth issue debate and did we go to the moon, are kind of used as proxies of whether or not people should be taken seriously in public, and whether or not somebody's crazy, quote unquote, or not. And what's actually crazy is prioritizing secondhand information above firsthand information. And that is actually, like, if there is a definition of crazy, that is it. It is insane to do that. That would mean you stick your hand in the boiling pot of water because I told you it was cold, and you leave it there because I told you so, and you're not. You are disregarding your own sensory information and your own firsthand experience. That's, if there is a definition of insane, it's that. It's not this stupid repeated thing of like doing the same thing and expecting a different result. It's not a stupid statement. Actually, there's some deep like lessons there. Obviously, that's why it's repeated. But I think that even more fundamentally like insane would be to prioritize secondhand information above firsthand information. That is when you've stopped thinking. And I mean, so is probably doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. But sometimes it's not dependent upon you, what changes the result. Sometimes it's the circumstances outside you that change the result. But should probably like adjust your strategy if you keep getting the same result and it's not the one that you want for whatever it is that you're doing. But this issue of the flat Earth debate is very interesting to me, and so is the going to the moon debate, because of how we moralize it and how we judge people about it, and they're both issues that I have like personal interest in, topics that are very relevant about as relevant as you can get, which is rockets and planes, the craft and the technology to get us to space, or to get us from one side of the world to the other, or to get us outside of the Earth. Um, and satellite technology and things like that. I have the Skynet, what is it? The Skyview app on my phone that shows you all the orbits of everything. Definitely recommend getting that app. It is very useful, actually. And it does show you a spherical perspective, which doesn't mean that it's false, though, and it doesn't mean that a flat Earth concept or model is false either. You have a flat Earth concept of the world. You do. That is the majority of, almost always, how you operate. When you navigate the world, you navigate it as if it is flat. And I'm not sure about this because I don't have a powerful enough camera, but people say that, Christopher Columbus said that the Earth was a sphere because he noticed that the ships disappeared on the horizon. And you can clearly see, like, the sun disappears on the horizon every day. I mean, watch the sunset. I was watching it with my daughter the other day, and I was like, "Goodbye, sun," and the sun is just dipping, 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 dipping. Within like 30 seconds, the sun went from completely above the horizon to completely below the horizon, and that does indicate that it is dipping below the horizon, but it actually doesn't necessarily indicate that we have a spherical Earth either. It indicates that the sun would be dipping below the horizon, but that's it. It doesn't necessarily tell you that the Earth is a sphere. It just tells you that the sun is dipping below the limit of your ability to perceive it, which is the horizon. It would look exactly the same if the Earth was flat, and the sun was just dipping below the edge of the Earth. It would look exactly the same. So that's not evidence, actually. Even though people think that would be evidence, that's not evidence. But we're going to talk about what it would be evidence, given if you're not, given the assumption that you don't have the means to jump in a rocket and leave the Earth. And also we're going to talk about why it really doesn't matter, and why it's definitely dependent upon your perspective anyways. And we're going to talk more about how this has, what this has revealed, and kind of how we could help maybe fix, not fix, because people are people, but how we could improve our education system to address this issue differently, and actually help train people how to think, instead of just kind of making a label that we can use to brand people as crazy or something, which is just nuts. It is actually crazy. Everybody that I'm speaking to goes about their lives as if the Earth is flat. And I do think that if you leave it, it looks like it presents as a sphere, but it still presents to us as flat every single day. And you have to admit that. By the way, please hit the like button. Please comment in the live chat any questions that you have. I'm also going to discuss a new kind of project that I'm working on for the show, and kind of a streamlining, a new change of the format that I kind of want to test out this year, and that's much more engaging with the audience, because that I come here for you guys, and the engagement with the audience is what keeps me coming back every week, even if it's like one person, like my always a cheerleading wife in the live chat. But here, let's go to a clip. We're going to show it. We're going to risk the copyright issue. I wonder if you, like, because and I'm just thinking out loud here because I'm not an expert on this, but if gravity, and which means space time, is actually warped by gravity or by the mass of an object, then that warps your perspective as well. So wouldn't that mean that if you had a powerful enough camera, like a Nikon, 5000 zoom? I don't know if anybody of you have ever seen the Nikon, like I think it's called the P1000 super zoom cameras. They're basically a telescope. But if you had a powerful enough telescope, could you see like around the world? I don't know. I think there was a movie about that, but it was about the universe and it was called like Paycheck. It's actually a very good movie. A very physicsy movie. It's about using a telescope to see around the universe completely, to look at yourself in the past or into the look at yourself in the future. It's about like using a very powerful telescope to see the future. It's a very, very, I'm not saying that makes any sense at all, but it is a good movie. Okay. Here. Again, flat Earth. Okay. We'll show it. This isn't Joe Rogan's channel. This is Whatcast.
Hello everybody, I am Matt, this is Whatcast. So today then we're going to be looking at this guy, Roger Avery, his name is.
The eyes, it is flat. And there is a very conspiracy theory that freaks everybody out is flat Earth. Now, I don't know what the Earth is, but experientially, through the testimony of the eyes, it is flat. And there is very little chance that I will ever in my life, or most of us will ever in our life experience anything other than what is effectively a flat Earth.
That's due to scale, but you could look beyond that and say, well, it looks flat to me, and that be your evidence, or you're going to provide any evidence, let's say.
And
you could say that that's due to scale, but I don't really know how true that necessarily is. It might be that that is the case, and I understand that that seems like it makes sense, but I don't know actually how true that is. I think there's more going on. That's just my feeling on it. But it's not just an empty feeling, but I think that there's more going on than it's just due to scale. When you see, I know because of my work on Sentient Singularity Theory and the physics that are coming out, that others are doing and reaching similar conclusions, that shape, space-time is an emergent perspective. It is a map. It is not the actual territory. And I think Eric Weinstein said something like that too. And that's true. We are what dictates the conception, perception, and therefore also emergence of shape. And it is our interaction with other sentient beings, according to Sentient Singularity Theory. And that means that has something to do with why we see the Earth the shape that it is. And so does our goal. Your goal determines your perspective. And when you have a goal of flying across the country from LA to New York, you don't have a goal of perceiving a curvature. You have a goal of moving along a flat plane. We literally call it an aeroplane. It is moving. It is a vehicle that moves through the air on a plane, on a flat plane, through the air. That's what that means, an aeroplane. And it is just as flat as our roads are. And even if you're in an F-16 and you're having some fun, like there are some roads that do this. That doesn't mean that you're not moving in a manner that is being perceived as a flat plane. It's not even just a flat plane. It's a straight line from one location, which is really one experience or one moment, to another moment that is your goal moment. I am here in my house. I want to go to Chick-fil-A. I'm going in a line to Chick-fil-A. I don't think about it as a plane. I navigate it as a plane because my degrees of freedom present on a plane because you're having multiple degrees of freedom manifesting along a single line. And, that branching causes like the perception of a plane, because now you're going that way, but you can also go that way, or you can go that way, if that makes sense. This is how our mind kind of organizes the information and presents us with this picture that we can navigate and use to achieve our goals. And you have to recognize that everything that we do is under the assumption that the earth is flat. There's one thing. I live in Texas. I live in Austin, and I will say it takes about 4 to 6 hours to drive from one side of California to the other, from the one coast to the border, from the west coast to the border, to the eastern border of California, no matter basically where you are in California. And if you look on a map, it looks like it's like probably half the width of Texas. So you'd expect it would take 8 to 12 hours to drive across Texas. No. Texas is way bigger when you actually try and cross it and you realize that in your experience than it presents on a map, which is probably one of the better bits of evidence that, there is a spherical element there. There is a spherical shape that we are navigating in certain circumstances that is being presented. And so as far as my personal experience, like that, it's that. I can turn on my Skyview app and I can see that there are satellites in orbit and stuff like that. But that doesn't actually, that tells me that they might be going in a circle. That's evidence they're going in a circle, but it's not evidence that I am a sphere. Again, if this was if the Earth was flat, it would look the same. But if another bit of firsthand evidence that, like, I think is supportive of the idea that the Earth looks like a sphere, at least, and manifests as a sphere when you are outside it, looking at it, is when we look at the sun, it looks like a sphere, and when we look at the moon, it looks like a sphere, and when we look at stars and other planets, they look like spheres. And I can see that firsthand myself, from looking at it from the outside, looking at Saturn, looking at Jupiter, looking at the moon, the sun. I think those are the only planets that I've ever seen through firsthand through a telescope. You can see Venus in the sky, but you can't. I've never zoomed in on Venus to see it. But you can get one of those Nikon super zooms and zoom in on Saturn and see its rings. I've done it. It's pretty neat. But it looks like the moon looks like a sphere from the outside. But if you're on it, I bet you it looks flat, even though it's much smaller scale than the Earth. And I bet you it still looks flat, and you will conceive of it as flat as you navigate it, for sure. And it's gravity that really is the cause of that. If you're sticking to a surface, it doesn't matter if it, people, this is again, like when people say, oh, it's a scaling problem that you don't see the Earth as a sphere. I don't know exactly how true that really is. And when I say that, what I mean is, if the Earth was the size of an exercise ball, and you were the same size, but you were but it had the same gravity, so you could walk along the outside of it, completely around and you wouldn't fall off, you would see, if you were looking, you would see a spherical shape of the exercise ball. But as you navigated the exercise ball from one point to another, you would assume a flat plane. You would act as if it was a flat plane, because you're still moving along the surface of the ball. You're not thinking about it. You don't need to think about it as a sphere. That's what I mean by it's not just a scaling problem. It's a goal dependent and gravity dependent perspective. I know you can do calculations and that indicate and are evidence that the Earth is a sphere, but you're looking for a spherical shape when you're doing that. If you're like measuring a pole here and measuring a pole there, and you're doing that math that they did to try and prove that the Earth was a sphere, you will see a spherical shape. You're looking for it. And this is like what sentient singularity theory can really help us realize about ourselves. And I said last week that I think I should probably pull it up, but Kurt Chaimungal had posted on his Twitter that he was asking, what's the purpose, what's the use of a consciousness first metaphysics framework? Like, what can it allow you to do? What technologies can it unlock, basically? And the technologies primarily that it unlocks are mental technologies and social technologies. And what's interesting when you think about like how if sentient singularity theory could be described as any type of theory, like when people say, is it idealism? Is it an idealist theory? Is it a physicalist theory? Is it a monist theory or non-dualist theory? It's a theistic theory. It's kind of the scientific context of theism. It's not a religion. By theism, all I mean is that existence itself is a single. It is initially a single, all-encompassing, sentient being. It's someone. Existence. It's not something. It's someone. That's what I mean by theism. I don't mean Christianity or Judaism or Islam specifically. I mean just existence is a single sentient someone. That's what theism is, and that we are all within that being, being created within that being by that being. So that is the context that we're perceiving shape. That is why we perceive shape and space-time, is because of this nested interaction, nested web of interaction that we have with other sentient beings within the single initial all-encompassing sentient being that is God, or is sentient existence itself. And that's the context that sentient singularity theory puts forth, and that is the context that you must think about why we would perceive space in the first place, and then also, therefore, why we would perceive shape the way that we do. It's not just a matter of scale, like this guy says. It's a matter of goal, and even more than that.
The way laser sighting across large bodies of water, or navigation maps for air travel for pilots, is always a presumption of a flat Earth. It's always in the pilot manuals.
I don't know.
No, it isn't. It's simplified in there. It all.
I don't know. I'm not a pilot, so I don't know. I don't know if he's a pilot, but we're gonna hear what he says. He can say it's simplified, but the thing is if it's accurate enough to be operative, if it works, then it is accurate in some way. It is accurate to. It doesn't matter if it's been simplified. If it will get you from literally, if it works so well that you can fly from one, 20 by 20 foot square on one side of the world to another 20 by 20 foot square and land perfectly on that square, which pilots do every single day, then it is more than just a simple fix. It is operatively accurate.
Of constant mass, which it never is, because it can't be constant mass if you're burning jet fuel the whole fucking journey, and also a rigid aircraft, which no aircraft is rigid. Sit on the wing, sit on a wing seat, look at the wing in mid-flight and tell me that that's rigid. It's not. It's simplifying it.
And on maps.
I don't know what that has to do with anything.
Well, if you're flying a jet at low altitude, you're not making corrections for curvature, even though you're going fast enough where you should be. So what's actually happening there? Well,
what's actually happening there is that we live in a pressure gradient because gravity exists. So there is dense, less dense as we go up. They then, the flight dynamics mean that you get to a level of density of pressure that keeps you at a certain altitude. Then with the thrust and everything else, can't remember the whole thing, but that keeps you within that pressure. So you naturally follow the curvature of the Earth, because if you was to not follow the curvature of the Earth and go into space, because of the way the plane is flying and the power and the thrust and everything at that moment, if you go outside, if you go higher than the pressure that you're in, you will instantly drop back down to it again, because it'll have to level off, right? Everything you're using will keep you there. That's the layman's way of saying it. I'm obviously wording it quite badly. You're sitting within a level of pressure that you've arranged the plane to remain in to keep altitude, is the answer.
And so the idea is...
He's right about that, but what's interesting is when you think about, and I've never launched a rocket into space. I've seen rockets launched. Saw a rocket when I went to Mindfest. We were all out to dinner, and we were leaving dinner, and we looked up, and people were like, "What is that?" And I was like, "That's a rocket launching from Cape Canaveral." And we looked it up. It was a SpaceX rocket, and it had just taken off, and then it disappeared, and everybody was like, "It's gone," and I was like, "No, it's staging. Just wait." And then all of a sudden, it relit and blew apart, and it was staging when a rocket comes apart, because a rocket cannot carry its own mass and still get into orbit. At least no rocket that we've created is able to be what's called a single stage to orbit, which means like you just fill it up and then launch to orbit. You basically need to shed weight as you go in order to escape, or in order to get into orbit, so it drops pieces off as it goes up, and it uses up its fuel, and that's what it does. I'm sure you've seen videos of this. Watch Apollo 13. It is a great movie, but you can see a rocket do this when they launch, and but what is interesting is when you do see a rocket launch, it goes like this. It doesn't go up. It goes like an airplane. Like it goes like flat almost. It kind of adopts a flat plane kind of trajectory, essentially. It's trying to go parallel with the Earth. And it's just trying to go fast enough and escape, get far enough outside the atmosphere to where it's not experiencing, much drag anymore. And then it can just kind of coast at 17,500 miles an hour and just, stay there for a much more extended period of time. Not forever, but for an extended period of time. That, I think it's 17,500 miles an hour is like the speed you need to hit to get to orbit, which is interesting that it's a speed. It's not like you just blast off and go straight off of Earth, which is kind of what you would think if it was this sphere, in this kind of simple sphere mindset that, most of us have due to school, that we're just on a rock. It's like, how do you get off the rock? You go off the rock. But that's not what they do. And when I've seen rockets launch firsthand, that's my firsthand information. They do not go up alone. They go up and then they curve and they go like an airplane parallel with the Earth. And when you're in orbit, you are parallel to the surface of the Earth. You're just, you know, beyond drag, most drag. But that's fascinating. That's what I mean by there's something with going on with gravity, that it's not just about scale. It forces us to navigate in our space in a certain way. That is not how you would kind of simply think it would be done. You would think that the most efficient way to get into space is just to go straight up, and that's not what any rockets do. And I get it. There's like the Earth is moving and it's got gravity and it's pulling, so like, basically everything's falling around itself, and you've got this Lorentz pointer going, whole system going on, and that's probably has something to do with why rockets don't fly straight up to get out of Earth. But I'm gonna look that up actually right now and see if that's correct, because that seems like it's probably correct. Why? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't change how you have to go about it. Like, you have to go about this as if it is you're basically flying on a flat plane. Why don't rockets go straight up to get to space? This is like probably super amateur question for if you're actually studying this stuff beyond just the vehicles. Like I like the tech. I don't really care as much about space. I like planes and rockets. Rockets don't go straight up to space because their goal is not just to reach high altitude, but to reach orbit, which requires immense horizontal speed to avoid falling back down. They initially launch vertically to quickly clear the thickest part of the atmosphere, then perform a gravity turn, gradually tilting horizontally to maximize fuel efficiency and leverage the Earth's rotational velocity. Orbit needs speed, not just altitude. The gravity turn saves fuel. Overcoming atmospheric drag, a straight-up trajectory is efficient for leaving the dense lower atmosphere, but terrible for gaining the horizontal speed necessary to get to orbit. And launching towards the east allows the rocket to gain about 1,000 miles an hour boost from the Earth's rotation. Interesting. Seems to make sense. But the thing is again, you can be like, that seems to make sense. And that you need to be content with that and not be like, if you don't believe that that's true, then you are a crazy person. If you've never been in a rocket that has gone into orbit, then you don't know. You're just reading. That doesn't mean it's not useful, and it doesn't mean you're not correct. It just means you can't know that you're correct. That's all it means. And that's the point. Recognize the limit of what you can know. I'm not here to argue that the Earth is flat. I'm not here to argue that the Earth is a sphere. Again, I think that it's dependent on us. That's what space-time is emergent. Okay, I'm not concerned with the shape of the Earth. I am concerned with what does it mean to think, and what does it mean to fail to think. Anyways, please hit the like button if you find this interesting. And comment any questions that you have in the chat. Last week we had so much engagement in the chat. It was awesome. And I would have expected a little bit more on this topic, but we did start a bit late. People are waiting to judge me, see what they're going to say. Or see what I say before they say what they're going to say. Why do rockets always curve? Can rockets go straight into space? Because getting into orbit means going sideways so quickly that you miss the Earth when you fall back down. Yeah, exactly. It's like everything's falling around it itself, which really just means everything's moving. And you're just taking advantage of that dynamic. But again, you're flying basically horizontal the um to the surface of the Earth, which is kind of navigating on a flat trajectory, essentially. It's fascinating. This issue is fascinating. It's not fascinating because I care what the shape of the Earth is. I don't think that's actually fascinating. I think what's fascinating about it is just how much it reveals about our failure to know what it means to think, our failure to think, our failure to judge, and our kind of like tribalistic inclination now and training to judge people if they are thinking. I mean, even if the Earth is a sphere, the people who assume it's a sphere and have never been into orbit, and are judging people who are thinking about it and assuming that it's flat, just because their experience and our experience always presents itself as if it is flat. The person who's actually thinking properly is the person who is thinking about this is assuming that we should just prioritize the idea that this is a flat plane. Even though it might be wrong, they're still thinking right, even if they are ultimately wrong. Because what they would need to know to experience in order to change their what conclusion they should be assuming, or not even assuming, but prioritizing, would require a different experience that they don't have, and they can't take information in and prioritize it as if it's firsthand information if it's not their actual personal experience. Cameras don't count. Textbooks don't count. Even Skyview app doesn't count. And even calculating things necessarily doesn't, like the width of Texas compared to it, what it would be on a map, like versus what it would be on a globe. That is not enough to know. It's pretty close if you did the calculations yourself, but if you're assuming, if you're taking somebody else's calculations, if you're assuming somebody else's calculations are correct and you haven't actually done them yourself, then that doesn't count as firsthand investigation. Actually, you have to do the calculations yourself, and calculating is perceiving. It's just using a different method to try and to get a perspective on some circumstance. But you have to do the calculations yourself. You can't just rely on somebody else's math and trust it. Looking and sounding great. Howdy, I'm late as howdy. I was late. I was later than normal. My daughter has discovered that she can delay bedtime by bringing up every excuse in the book. So, I need water. Let's read this book. She literally will go get 2 books. She gives me 1 book. She takes 1 book. She reads 1 book while she tells me to read the other book. And then she switches the books and she says, now it's Juliana's turn. Now it's Dada's turn to read this book. It's Juliana's turn to read this book. And then we have to switch books. And then she goes and gets other books. And it's like 10 books at this point before I just have to walk away. But tonight I tried something different and it actually was amazing. I told her a story for the first time to get her to go to sleep. I've never told her. She's never heard a story before. This is the first time like someone told her a story. Isn't that odd? This is why having children is so fascinating if you're the parent, because if I say, I told my daughter a story tonight to make her go to sleep, you're like, okay, I've heard, people have told me stories. I've seen people tell other people stories. But what you're not seeing is that, and what I am seeing is that that's the first time anyone's ever told her a story. It's a very simple story. I was just like, she was just book after book after book after book to just delay going to bed. And I needed to start my stream. So I was like, here, let's Dada's going to tell you a story. there was a mountain, and then there was a small tree on this mountain, and then the rain gave the tree water, and it grew so high, and then some birds landed on it and made a nest, and they laid eggs, and the eggs hatched, and there were baby birds, and they were so cozy. And then the sun went down, and the moon came up, and the stars came out, and then the birds were so cozy, and they went to sleep just like Juliana. And that was the story. I made it up on the fly as I went, so don't judge it too hard. But it worked. She was amazed. She was like, you could tell she was visualizing this. And the thing is you have to reach. She has to reach a certain level linguistically, to be able to hear a story and actually have it mean anything. Because when you hear a story, you're visualizing it in your head. You're visualizing the mountain and the small tree growing, the rain and the sun going down and the birds, making a nest. You have to know what a nest is and what eggs are and what birds are and what tree means, and rain and water and what it means to be so high, like when something is so high. Like you have to know what all of those things mean for that to actually hear that story and actually have it mean anything to you. And so she, for the first time, is like at the level where I could tell her a story and she was able to visualize it in her head. She was amazed. Her eyes were huge, and you could tell she was just like, it was like she had seen a movie for the first time in her life, but it was going on inside her head. It was very cool to see. And it is so fascinating to see that kind of stuff. And you cannot see it really in any other circumstance other than when you're a parent. People say, oh, teachers get to watch like kids like figure out the world. No, they don't. They really don't. If you do, then you caught a lucky moment. It's not because of the curriculum that you're teaching that you get to see the kids figure out the world. I hate when teachers say my kids. But it's like when, you start at a job and they say, here, you work for Jack in the Box, and they're like, here at the Jack in the Box family, we care about each other. And it's like, no, you don't. Don't lie to me. I'm here because I can help accomplish a goal for you. And this is a transactional relationship, and that's it. It's not a family, but when you are a parent, you actually get to teach your kid about the world and introduce them to the world. That's how you teach them about the world, not by telling them about it, by bringing them into it. And that's what our education system is gotten wrong. They tell you about the world. It's a sphere, and you better believe it's a sphere, because you don't want to be like one of those crazy flat earth people. And it's like, okay, I don't want to be one of those crazy flat earth people, so I definitely believe it's a sphere. I know way more about orbit and way more about what is said about orbit and rockets and rocketry than most people who have graduated high school. And but most people who have graduated high school would laugh at anyone who had ever questioned the shape of the earth. And I never understood that. Even with my interest in like rocketry and aerospace, and my assumption that when you leave the earth and you look back at it, it looks like a sphere. That's what I believe. I don't know, because I've never been, but I do. That is my current assumption. I hope one day to actually be able to test that. I'd love to go to the moon. I don't think anybody ever will want to go to Mars. I know Elon Musk just said that they're pivoting from SpaceX from going to Mars to now going to the moon. Yeah, probably a good idea. You don't even have real-time communication with people on Mars, and it's worse than the moon. You can't survive outside of a spacesuit on either one of them. So like, why is Mars better than the moon when the moon is 4 days away? Mars is like 4 months if you're going fast. I don't know if I'll ever see anybody go to Mars. And I wouldn't blame anybody for that. Like I don't think I don't think anybody it makes. I would like to see people try, but I also don't want to because I think it's a really stupid decision for anybody to try and go to Mars. I really do, and I would have never said that like prior to the path that led me to sentient singularity theory. It changes your priorities. What is important is other people, and they're here. They're not on Mars. And you can't communicate with anybody if you go to Mars. You literally like you have to communicate via email with anyone back on Earth for the entire time that you're on Mars, and there's no one that can help you ever if you get in any kind of trouble. And it's probably not even a very pretty place, to be quite honest. Earth is probably I'm sure Earth is way prettier in every way. There's probably nowhere on Mars that is even close to as pretty as like your average national park on Earth. And at least the moon is probably pretty boring after a few hours, but at least it's like a few days, to get back home, and you can still like have a FaceTime call with somebody who's here. I would go to the moon if I had the chance, and it seemed like it was not too risky, but I would never go to Mars. And Elon Musk he said, I would like to die on Mars. I think that sounds awful. Like I can't. You want to die in an ugly and lonely place that's basically lifeless, as far as the life that inspires us, at least. Sentient singularity theory takes a different perspective on life than just cellular life, but it seems like it's a lacking of any kind of interesting animals, and there's no people, as far as we know, on Mars. So it just seems boring. It seems like an awful place. It's funny because if you listen, sometimes I listen to like, just YouTube videos about planets and moons and stuff to just go to sleep if I'm thinking too much, and I need something to just distract me. And they'll talk about like Venus as if it is like hell. It's so hot. There's so much pressure, and it's basically hell. It's like, dude, you can't survive on Venus or Mars on the surface. You have to be completely in a protected vessel in anywhere but Earth. It doesn't matter if it's how hot it is on Venus. You're still, the experience is the same for you. Venus is probably actually prettier than Mars in some ways. Like at least it has some pretty epic clouds probably. But total side tangent, but I don't see the point in going beyond the moon. I just don't. Orbit is very, very useful. We use orbit for satellites, and that is, an incredible technology. What orbit allows for things that are very, very useful to people here on Earth, and the moon just seems like, pretty interesting experience, once in your life. But it's like going to climbing Mount Everest. It's like you wouldn't want to do it more than once, probably, and because what changes, and also, it's like you do it just to say you did it and to see the view, and that's it. I bet the view is amazing from the moon of Earth. Like it's funny because we're talking about, flat Earth versus, sphere Earth. And I was a photographer professionally for a little while, actually. And I almost had a minor in it in college. And I love photography. It's like the only art that I kind of engage in that's like art, that is thought of as art. And one of the coolest photos ever is called Earthrise, and I'm assuming it's real. I know some people would assume it's not. I don't know, but I'm assuming that it is. And it was the picture that was snapped from the from by an astronaut that was orbiting around the moon. It wasn't taken from the surface of the moon. They were going around the moon, and it was taken from inside the ship. Actually, people think it's taken from the surface of the moon, but it's not. It's this. So. I don't know which. It's probably they took a bunch of them, but that's basically it. Right? What a picture, man! What a shot! That's awesome. Here's some of my photography, actually. There's images. And I'll go to the chat. I know people are commenting in there. I can see it going off. Here's like one of my photos. About as long exposure from Joshua Tree. You can see like planes, probably planes moving. This guy. That was taken. It was like pitch black, and I put the camera on a tripod and set it to a long exposure, and then I took the flash, like a detachable flash, and I shot it at the rock and the Joshua Tree, and then I looked at what I got, and that's what I got. It was a very cool picture. It was my first time. My wife and I had just started dating, and I was like, I'm gonna take you camping into the wilderness, and she'd never been camping, and she was a professional photographer at the time too, a wedding photographer, very good wedding photographer, and she was kind of freaked out that we were like in the middle of the desert at night alone, and she was not having a good time. And then I was like, wait, watch this picture, and I got this shot, and she was so impressed, and all she wanted to do was stay out and take pictures with me all night long in the desert. It went the mood went from, why is this man bringing me to this like sketchy desert, and I'm not comfortable at all, and there's animals out here, and we could get hurt, and then to, wow, that's awesome. And it was a cool moment. I don't know. Blessings for you and your daughter. Nice, thank you. Flat Earth is so fun. It is so fun because it's just a exercise in thinking. But the main point is that you should prioritize firsthand information, and you should recognize the limits of what you can know to be true, which is what the limit is, what you have personally experienced, and realizing that anything that you've not personally experienced, you can assume is true. I assume the Earth, that Earthrise photo is a true photo, and that the story about it is true. I believe that, but I don't know. But I think, and that's enough. That's plenty. That is actually correct. Like it's not just about getting the correct answer. It's about thinking properly. Not even properly, but actually thinking, like properly thinking, which is, there's only one way to think. If you are not prioritizing firsthand information, you aren't thinking. You're not. You're just parroting at that point, like by definition. Moon first, then Mars. Yeah, Moon first, then Mars. But I just don't see the point in going to Mars. I'm not saying we'll never go. I'm not saying no one should go. I'm just saying I wouldn't tell anybody to go. I would never want anyone that I love to go to Mars. You're losing them. Even if they come back, it's like 2 years later, and for what, you know? So like there anything that I don't know, it would have to be quite a giant expedition. We really would have to get uh, space travel so dialed in and developed for a Mars mission to be even remotely, um, I don't even want to say reasonable, but like not insane. It's and I used to be like, man, Mars Direct. Like there was a proposal called Mars Direct, and it was like, what's the bare minimum we would need to be able to do to go to Mars? And I think it was conceived in the 80s. And technically, like you could do it with today's technology, but it would be awful, and your chances of success are so small. Or the likelihood that things would go wrong at some point during this mission, and that problem that you experience, no matter how minor, would be so exacerbated by the sheer distance that you are from help that it would almost any problem would be could become lethal. Um, like Oregon Trail, people going on the Oregon Trail, that was so dangerous. It is so much worse to go to Mars. And I mean, it's not even comparable. And we you learn, all you do in school is learn about how dangerous that is. And it's like going to Mars would be, right now with our current technology, it would be so unreasonable to even attempt. I'm not saying you couldn't get lucky and get there, but it would be so uncomfortable, and it would be more likely that you would die at some point on the mission than you would come back. When Apollo 13 happened, like they could get them back. It is amazing that they got them back, those astronauts. That is like, I love that story. I hope it's true. I wasn't there again. It took place in the past, so during a time that I wasn't alive, and it was also not something I could have witnessed firsthand, even if I was alive in the 1970s when it happened. I think it was in the 70s. Well, it must have been, because 69 we went to the moon, was Apollo 11, and then 12 was probably like later that year, and then 13 was probably 1971. Apollo. Let's see. 1970. Yep. Crazy story. But if that happened like on a Mars mission, done. Absolutely done. Not even a chance at rescue. I recently rewatched The Martian with Matt Damon, where he like gets stranded on Mars and survives, and then they have to go back and pick him up, and he basically like launches himself back up to the crewed ship on top of an old rocket that he found, and he's just strapped to the top of it, and then I think he like cuts a hole in his suit to get him to fly the rest of the distance, because he didn't quite make it far enough to rendezvous with the ship. That, like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but you don't want to ever be in a circumstance where you got to trust on those kinds of odds, or those types of circumstances going well. Definitely not. I read somewhere that, every now and then you see headlines like this. So like, who knows what's true, and who knows if they're even right, but that they had found evidence that seemed to indicate like that it was possible that there was microbial life on Mars one day, at some point in the past. And I would not be surprised at that at all, if that was the case. I don't think it would even be like, I would be surprised if there never was, to be quite honest. I'd be more surprised. But I don't think it really makes much of a difference either. It seems like it does. It's like, that means there's aliens. It's like, dude, there's way more interesting things at the bottom of the ocean than whatever is on Mars, unless there's stuff on Mars that's not even just microbial. Yeah. Unless there's reptilians on Mars, there's way more interesting things at the bottom of the ocean. You ever seen an octopus? That's a interesting creature. I found one for the first time this over Christmas, like the week of Christmas. I went back to visit family in California, and I took my daughter to the beach for the first time, and I was walking along the tide pools, and I've always wanted to find an octopus at the tide pools, and I found an octopus. Maybe I can actually like show the video. It was awesome. I gave him a handshake, actually. But what are you going to find that is more interesting than that? I remember there was this movie called Europa, and they go to Europa, the moon, Saturn's moon, Europa, and there's like a proposed mission to go and drill under the ice there and get to the ocean that's supposedly underneath it, of liquid water. And they do this, and basically they find this like radioactive octopus. And that's the most interesting animal that they could possibly think of putting into this movie. Is still not as interesting as a real octopus that can change its shape and color completely, like at will. Change its texture, change its color. Shoot out a smoke screen. I mean, octopus is pretty amazing of an animal. Let me see if I can send this to myself. But yeah. People say, talk about, a lot of the arguments that we for why we didn't go to the moon are that, why haven't we been back? The idea that we used to have the technology to do it, and now we don't, and that seems crazy because technology just gets better over time. That's actually not true. That doesn't sound crazy at all, actually. If you follow aerospace tech, I mean, there are some things that have improved, a lot of things that have improved over time, but our planes have gotten slower. We don't have, I mean, they made the SR-71 Blackbird was created on like slide rules. I mean, and completely in secret. Like that, I don't even think we would risk putting a man in something like that anymore. The way that we used to. We just don't have the will to do something like that. We don't have the will to go back to the moon. It's too dangerous, and we're too risk averse at this point. We need it to be like way, way, way more routine. And also, if you follow like NASA and their projects since the space shuttle have all been any of NASA's manned proposals since the space shuttle have been stupid. Like, they are worse than what they had in the 60s. And anytime Boeing tested their new capsule, and you're like, this capsule looks the same as the one from like the Apollo missions. It's just got more powerful computers, and it's failing. Like I think it failed. It failed its test or whatever. And I mean, and it's so expensive. Who would want to ride in that thing too? We really have gone backwards in a lot of technological abilities. Like, if you watch the old videos, remember there's a video that you could find online, and here, look at this. Let's see if my octopus video came in first, though. It did. Here. But there's a video on YouTube that will show you just how smart like people used to be.
Look at him
And
go.
they're not nearly as smart as they are. That they're not nearly as smart today, but I'll show you that in a second. But here, look at this. This is an octopus that I found.
Look at him go. Hi, bud. Hi. What? Oh my goodness, I'm giving him a handshake. What? Cool! So cool! Yes!
Guys, I've been trying to find an octopus for so many years. I was so stoked about that. I realize my desktop is a mess for anybody that saw it. I have lots of files. I just use the Finder window. It's just better. But I should probably clean this out a bit. Okay, so this differential video. Old. This video right here. This video is proof that people used to be way smarter. And than they are today. We haven't gotten smarter. We've gotten, as a whole, I think, dumber. We just are riding on the accomplishments of people of the past.
Troop goes around the corner. The riders on the outside of the turn have to adjust their speed to keep even with the riders on the inside. The man on the outside has to ride a lot farther and a lot faster in order to keep up with the parade. The outside wheels must spin faster than the wheels on the inside because they have a greater distance to travel in the same length of time. When a wagon turns a corner, the wheels can travel at different speeds because each one can turn freely on the axles. And in the early automobiles, the rear wheels turned separately and only one wheel was connected to the engine. But when only one wheel was driven by the engine, it had to do all the work, and it couldn't get a good enough grip on the road to do its job properly. So the one-wheel drive was soon out of date. But if two wheels are locked on an axle so that they are not free to turn separately, one or the other has to slide. So engineers had to find a way to connect both rear wheels to the engine without sliding and slipping on turns. The device which makes this possible is a part of the rear axle. It is called the differential because it can drive the rear wheels at different speeds on the inner end of each axle, so that by turning the spokes, we can turn each wheel separately. With a bar or crosspiece, we can turn both wheels in the same direction at the same rate of speed. Let's get something to hold this bar in place so that it will press against the spokes. Notice that this support is not locked to the axle. It turns freely.
Like, I don't even think we're smart enough. Most people are smart enough nowadays to make a video this explanatory, this clearly explanatory.
Now, we can spin the wheels by rotating the support.
Watch this.
This is fine, as long as both wheels are able to turn at the same speed. But let's see what happens when we go around the corner. With this arrangement, we cannot drive one wheel faster than the other. And if we stop one wheel, the other wheel won't budge. Let's put this bar on a pivot so that it can swing in either direction. Now, the bar can still turn both wheels at the same speed. And because it pivots, it lets one wheel turn even when the other is stopped. But if turned too far, the bar will swing around until it won't drive the spokes that turn either wheel. We need another crossbar and more spokes to carry on the job. When we stop one wheel, the crossbars will continue to push the spokes of the free wheel around. As long as both wheels are free to turn, the bars do not swing on their pivot, and the wheels move at the same speed. Now we have the working principles of a differential. To adapt the model for use in an automobile, we will have to make a few changes. In order to reduce the jerky action caused by wide spaces between the spokes, we will put in more spokes. Further filling in the spaces between the spokes gives steadier, more continuous action, and changing the shape gives firm, constant contact. Now we can make the gears thicker and stronger, and we have differential gears.
That's amazing. That is an amazing video. And you couldn't. There's nobody that makes explainer videos like that anymore. And that concept of a differential in the axle of a car, to allow both wheels to be driven by the engine and receive power, but also both wheels to spin freely, so that when you make a turn, they can turn according to, the amount of distance that they have to travel. Most people don't even know what a differential is today. And if they do, they've probably not seen a video that's that good at explaining what it is if it was made after this one. And we were people. A lot of tech has gotten worse. Or it's not even that it's gotten worse. It's that we are not as smart on average as we were in the past. And that makes sense, because in the past you had to figure out solutions to problems. Now, most of our most essential problems have been solved by other people. And we just, now have to just ask Grok how to do it. And Grok just references books that were written by people who figured out how to do it in the past. And we don't have to go figure it out and put it all together as, kind of like a detective or piecing a puzzle together. We just have to look at what people did in the past and then do what they did. And that is a very different informational circumstance than the people of the past. Like, they had to figure stuff out. We just have to basically make things more efficient. And the further society goes along, like, the more this is true. There's always some new novel things that have to be figured out, but that are only possible to even be presented within this context of a certain time. But people were much more familiar with figuring out problems, and aka thinking, in the past than they are today. Our education system was not modeled in the manner that it is until pretty recently in history. I don't know exactly when, but when did the modern public school the mid-19th century, 1850s. Like, that's not long ago. Like, there were people who were, alive when that happened, in probably the two who lasted until the 2000s, who saw the new millennium. Like, there, some of them, that's like, what, 150 years old actually at that point. So that's pretty old, but there were people that lived to be like 115, 115, that's like almost mid 1800s when you were born. If you died in like 2000 and you lived to be 115, you were born in like 85? That's a long time ago. But it's also not that long ago. And up until then, education was like, what do you want to do? Okay, now you're going to work with those people who do what you're going to do. Like, you want to be a blacksmith? Okay, you're going to go work with blacksmiths. It's like most things were apprenticeship type of education, which is the right type of education. You're introduced to the world that you want to study and work in, versus now you're kept separate from the world that you want to work in, but you're taught about the world before you are put into the world, and you're supposed to assume that what you're taught about the world is correct when you go into the world, and you have no idea if what they're teaching you is true. And the thing is that doesn't even really matter. The problem is that the whole idea of it is basically built under the assumption that you will assume what you're told about the world before you actually are able to put it to the test. And that is the opposite of thinking. The biggest problem with the school system isn't the curriculum. When people are like, do you know what they're teaching kids in school today? That doesn't matter. What matters is that the most formative and critical years of your life are spent sitting at a desk instead of figuring out problems. It's spent sitting at a desk memorizing instead of figuring out problems. And figuring out math problems is not figuring out problems. That is memorizing a recipe. The only time you ever actually have to figure out a problem for real in a math class is if you forget the formula and it's a word problem. That is the only time. And that was like when I thrived. If I had to memorize like an equation, then I was screwed. But if I was given a word problem and I didn't know the equation that I was supposed to use, I could figure out what equation, like I could build the equation that I needed. Because, those word problems, they give you the context that you would need to actually like think about it concretely instead of just abstract, this kind of abstract symbols and meaningless quantities of just a pure equation on its own, at least. But funny, my dad sent me my report card. I'm gonna get so much flack for this, but my dad sent me my report card the other day that he had found in storage, and he thought it was funny, and it was funny. By the way, there were years in college where I was basically a straight A student, but they were like the last half of college, and all the school prior to that, unless it was like field sciences, I was a terrible student. But I didn't go to I ditched and I never did my homework. And that will make you fail. But this is my report card just because it's funny. I shouldn't even show you guys this because people are gonna judge me for it, but I really don't care. I think it's hilarious. This was my what is this? This is my 11th grade report card. This is so funny, actually. It's like F, 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 F. Make sure there's no private information on here, because there's definitely some. Delete these. Some of this stuff. Like addresses. Okay, here. For all you people who showed up to a late night stream, this is your reward. You get to see my 2008 report card. Does not complete homework, absent, has low test scores, has incomplete work on tests, has low test quiz scores, missing numerous assignments, in F, 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 C minus, F, B minus, B minus. That was my report card in 11th grade. That's so funny. So funny. But I got it together and actually like started showing up to class and doing my homework in college, and I was like the top of every class that I actually did my homework in. So I wasn't unable to do the work. I was choosing not to in high school. I never understood why I would, but that's the thing, is like I was so, that's why I never did my homework in high school and some of college, the beginning of college, because I'm sitting there thinking, it just never made sense to me that I would go to school for 8 hours a day, and then I would go home and I'd be expected to do 3 hours of homework. And that seemed so stupid to me. I was like, in my head, I'm like, what are we paying you to do then if I'm supposed to just go teach myself this after school anyways? And in college, you can, pick and choose what classes you go to. But if you do the homework, it doesn't really matter if you show up to class. you can teach things to yourself, but you're not going to get a bad grade for not going to class. They don't care in college. I remember this teacher in high school. I took field sciences, which was about like it was basically a biology class, but it was focused on the Sonoran Desert, and I knew everything. I got the highest grade in the class because that was my passion. Was zoology. I do that, as just because I like it, not because it was my assignment. And I got a 98% on the final. I missed one question. And after I was done, I handed in my test and I was like, can I go? Since I'm done, like, can I leave and just go, get some food or whatever I want to do? Now, I'm done with this class this was my final. And the teacher was so frustrated with me, and he was such an academic, and he was a really smart guy, and he was actually a good teacher. I didn't need him to teach me because I already knew all the what he was teaching people, but I could tell that he got people excited about learning this stuff, who wasn't their like primary passion was learning the different birds and lizards and animals of the Sonoran Desert. But he always talked about how he had like lectured at Harvard, and he was just very much an academic, but a lot of solid field experience too. But he was so angry with me in that moment, which sucked because we had so much similar interests. I tried to be this guy's friend for like an entire year, and at the end he just looked. I handed my test. I'm like, I'm done. Can I go? I mean, otherwise I'm just going to sit at my desk. And he looks at me, he goes, they're never going to allow you to do this kind of crap in college. And I was like, okay. And I left. Dude, that is exactly the expectation in college, is if you finish your test, you leave. You don't sit there and, be babysat after you're done with your test. I don't understand what he was getting at. I was like ranting about high school, but the thing is like again, it comes back to like our education system is it is a babysitting system. That's what it is. And I understand that it's helpful to allow parents to work, but it also is destroying the opportunity that and the experiences necessary for us to learn how to think. You have to learn how to think on your own. You cannot be taught how to think. You have to practice it. And thinking is not just a matter of how high your IQ is, of whether or not you're good at thinking. You can have a 200 IQ and be a terrible thinker. Or you can have an 80 IQ and be a great thinker. Thinking is a skill that anyone can get good at. If you have a high IQ, if you're good at it, then it's like natural talent. But it's not talent in thinking, but it is like, it's like being born strong and fast, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a good fighter. But if you are naturally strong and fast and you train at fighting, then you are going to be you could be a great fighter. But fighting is a skill that you can learn. Anyone can actually get pretty good at fighting, especially if you like take the tools into consideration that you can use. I mean, a firearm does not require you to be strong and fast. Just if you're trained, you can beat Mike Tyson with a well-placed shot. I'm not saying you should shoot Mike Tyson. Don't do that. Seems like an all right guy. But the point is that, again, like you can train for things and get good at things, and you're not limited so much when it comes to thinking by your IQ. And same thing with just your competence in a lot of things that are not physically, that you're not limited by your physical circumstances. And yeah, it's just important to know. People get obsessed with IQ, and it's not nearly as important as people think. They were literate. I don't even want to say literate back then. Like the education was different. It was hands-on and experiential, and it allowed for people to learn how to think. You had to learn how to fix cars. You had to learn, you had shop class, you had to learn how to build things, and it either worked or it didn't. It wasn't, there was no participation, requirement. When I remember when I was in, if anybody's wondering why I showed a report card of FFFC minus, this is why. I was in 5th grade once, and I remember my teacher said, Tyler, you didn't do the warm-up. You need to do the warm-up in order to warm up your brain. And I was like, am I being graded on the warm-up? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay, well then I'm not going to do the warm-up. I don't need to do the warm-up. And she was like, well, it warms up your brain. And I was like, my brain's already warm. I literally did that. And she kicked me out of class at like 11. And, but the thing is I was actually thinking, and, I realized that this was not something that you needed to do. It was an opportunity for people who wanted it. And if you didn't want it, you didn't need to take it. And, that's what, but she was not happy with that. Like, that was not the expectation. The expectation is you will do this thing that is unnecessary for most, or potentially unnecessary at least. And it's not about whether or not it's useful. And that's not a good form of school. That's not an education. That's actual, that's basically just preventing you from educating yourself on things. I don't know. I think our school system is terrible. And I think that the flat earth debate and the moon, did we go to the moon even, debate is totally a byproduct of how it is handled, is a byproduct of how bad our schooling is. It's literally the opposite of what you would want. You take people out of the real world, you train them to memorize and to sit in one spot and regurgitate information that's out of context, and you tell them that this is true facts about the world and you don't give them the opportunity to actually test it. Everything is run, by, lawyers who are trying to avoid school having any kind of liability and being sued because some kid cuts their finger in a shop class. It's safer to just keep kids in their desks. And that's exactly what is the real motivating force driving our education system is just about like making it as like baby proofed as possible. And I understand baby proofing. Like my daughter, I baby proofed her bedroom, and when I converted her crib into a bed, and I took the door handles off the doors and reversed them so that I could lock her in there. That sounds like, oh man, you lock your daughter in the bedroom. But she's 2 years old, guys, and she's on the 2nd story. I can't have her be getting out in the middle of the night and like falling down the stairs. But she's never actually tried to get out, which is pretty amazing. And I, put things in all the outlets, little plugs in all the outlets, and got rid of any dangerous chemicals and any kind of choking hazards. Sometimes you got to baby proof a place, but not that the goal should be to actually like slowly make things less and less baby proofed, not more baby proofed because you're worried about being sued. Like that's the thing is you can't, parents are the real educators of their children. They are the ones responsible for teaching their, not even teaching their kids how to think, but making sure that their kids get the opportunities necessary to learn how to think, and the experiences necessary to learn how to think. a school cannot do it. It has the opposite goal, which is just to not allow you to get yourself into a situation that is, unpredictable. And those are the only situations where you can actually learn anything. And yeah, I mean, it's just impossible. And I get it. Like you can't really change the school system by just changing what's taught, because the incentive structures are still there of just nobody wants to send their kid to school, and then the school allow them to do something dangerous, and then the kid gets hurt. And now, do you blame the school? It's like, yeah, you kind of do. But at the same time, it's like, what are we supposed to do? Not allow them to do anything dangerous? We had this ropes class in my high school, and it was they literally had rock walls built into the wall of the gymnasium, like rock climbing. And I was terrified of heights, and I took this class to try and get over it. And I did, actually, and I set records in this class. I was so good at this class. And what this class taught me was that I could do things that I was afraid of and actually conquer my, it taught me methods of dealing with my fear in certain circumstances, because I was terrified of heights. And the girl who I wanted to ask to the prom was in my class, so I couldn't chicken out. I had to conquer my fears in front of everybody. I did ask her to prom. She denied me. And then she told me she said, "I'm not going, actually. My parents aren't letting me go." And I was like, "Oh, that's unfortunate." And then she went with the kid who looked the most like me in school, which is fascinating, actually. It's fine. I had a different prom date, but it was, that was a class that taught me probably some of my most important lessons about how to deal with my own self as I navigate, solving some problem. But they took the class away the year after I graduated, because a kid in the advanced ropes class unhooked himself and fell and broke his back and was paralyzed, and the lawyers got involved and they shut down the ropes class. And it's like, that was the only class that was there in this school that had any chance of really teaching people how to deal with fears. That's a very important lesson, and but there's no way to avoid that being like the incentives kind of being against allowing for risky circumstances like that. Only parents can allow their kids to be in circumstances like that. Specifically like dads, because moms are just trying to keep everything safe. That's their job, is to keep babies from killing themselves by accident. But a dad's job is to kind of like inspire, like push their kid more. And, we have different roles, but you can't have that be the role of a teacher whose real job is just to babysit a kid long enough to make sure they don't get hurt from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's just not going to happen. That's the real problem with our schools. And it leads to people judging people for thinking about the shape of the earth. Okay. What's up, memes? It's crazy, but not that old society-wise. How much? Not just enjoying Tyler's chatting, mostly to himself, or just us in delayed chat. Yeah, no, I get lost in the chat. I'm coming back to it. I'm sorry. I like Eric Leithman. That the flat Earth, the guy who's like talking about flat Earth in this clip. I was surprised by some pretty reasonable folks having major doubts about some generally accepted things. Yeah, two of the most intelligent and smart, not just intelligent, but smart people that I know, mentors of mine, leaders in their field, do not believe that we went to the moon. I think we did, but I don't think it's crazy to think that we didn't. I don't know I know the things they're focusing on, I don't think are actually the right things to focus on, but that's a discussion that you have. It's not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't go to the moon. You don't think we went to the moon? Like, you're crazy. It's like none of us were even alive. Neil deGrasse Tyson says, we are told since we are born to stand up, talk. After we are told to sit down and shut up. That's true. Stand up and talk. After that, we are told to sit down and shut up. That's true. That's school. Education and knowledge was still founded in the church. It's crazy, but not that old society-wise. Yeah. Then again, so much trust has been eroded. Perhaps it should not be surprising. Yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, yeah, a lot of trust has been eroded, but I mean, you shouldn't be trusting of secondhand information so much that if it turns out to be false, that it like rocks your world anyways. You should always recognize that you don't really know when you're taking someone's word for it. Fascinating to think folks could barely speak, let alone read or write, etc. Spell and spelling is a thing. Trust based on credentials. I'm a terrible speller. I'm not going to lie. When I was making the thumbnail for this video, I asked my wife how to spell Houston. And I live in Texas. And I'm like 35. And so I had spelled it wrong. I had to Google how to spell Houston. So I am not a good, I'm not going to judge anybody for terrible spelling. I'm a terrible speller. It's funny because I can spell the scientific name of pretty much every reptile in the world, but I cannot spell. I can tell you how to spell Varanus cerulavirens, but I cannot tell you how to spell Houston. I don't have an explanation for that. The last tech revolutionary humanity has overcome with the invention of the written word, my friend, till now. I can't read and nobody knows. Nice report card. I was very similar, more focused on girls and dirt bikes. I was just focused on going into the desert. I grew up in the Sonoran Desert. I would literally just ditch class and go into the desert and look at animals and wildlife. That's what I did. And when I got out of school, that's what I did. I went into the desert and looked at wildlife, and that's why I didn't do my homework. So I was ditching school to go into the desert and study animals and the environment. And then when I got off of school, I was not doing my homework because I was going into the desert to study animals and the environment. That was my original major in college, was biology, but I was so disheartened by the field when I got there that I changed it just to be more practical from making a living type of standpoint. And yeah, I mean, I remember like I spoke to somebody who was in the herpetology program, and I was like, yeah, what's your, what, reptiles do you like? Herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians. And I was like, you're in the herpetology program? Like, that's awesome. Like, what are you studying? What interests you? What got you interested in it? And they literally told me, well, I went to like my advisor and they basically said that there was like an opening for, in this program. And I don't really like know much about like reptiles, but they're cool, I guess. And but there was really just an opening. I'm like, you're now going to be called up by the media as the expert on snakes and lizards in the future, and you have no idea what you're talking about. You don't have no interest in them either. Then I quit. I changed my major after that. I was like, this, and he was the norm. I was the exception. I remember I went to my biology teacher who was trying to convince me, my biology professor, to not change my major. And he was like, what's your favorite animal? And I was like, I think I don't know what it is, probably a Gila monster, but I think I had probably said some type of monitor lizard. And I think I said Varanus gilleni, which is a scientific name of a little lizard that looks very unassuming to most people, and that's from Australia. And I like him though. And so I said that, and he was like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "That's interesting," because it was a niche. It's not like, oh, my favorite animal is a tiger. It was like a very niche animal that you only know about if you actually have a passion for the subject. And he was like, imagine just knowing every aspect of that animal, everything about how its cells work, down to the chemistry of its cells and that goes on within its cells, to how its cells come together, to how its organs work together, to how it integrates in its environment, how it interacts with other individuals of its own kind and of other kinds. And he was like, just imagine understanding every aspect of that animal. He's like, that's what you want to do, so you should be a biology major. And I was like, yeah, but I can do that without a biology degree, and I already do that, so I don't see the point in keeping up with it. And I dropped it. I don't have any regrets. The field is a total mess, like most fields. I've said on here before, like Eric Weinstein says, when progress stalls in a field, the incentives are to everybody acting like pathological. And he's totally right. And I understand that and saw that in the field of zoology and biology. And I see it every day because I interact with those people still every day. And nobody's discovering amazing new species that have never been discovered. All that's left pretty much is like a subspecies that's similar to, like, maybe it's a different color and slightly, different size, and it's from a different area, but it's like similar to a species we already know. It's like, oh, there's a slightly smaller and lighter colored population of giant squids in that part of the world. And we just realized that. But it's not a brand new species where like you're the first person to discover a giant squid. And that's just doesn't happen very often anymore. And so, but the field, people still have this like desire to do something new because that's what people want to do. People have a drive to be creative. Will is the desire to do that, which really means like the desire to do that which is not being done. And when everything has been kind of not discovered, but when you're operating on an old model where people were just classifying new species, and that's what your heroes did basically, or the people that you studied, that's what they did. That's all you know how to do. And so now it's your turn, and there's no more species to discover. So now we're going to make new species out of species that already exist. We're just going to say that one's from that part of this mountain range and that one's from a different mountain range. So now we're going to call them different species. And you just destroyed the definition of species. It drives me crazy. I know I've ranted about this before, but that is what that kind of thing is happening in physics. It is happening in biology. It is happening in zoology. It is happening in tech. Like Facebook is making changes to its user interface that make no sense other than just they had a good model and somebody had to do something. And so when you have a good model, but you still feel the need to change it, you can only change it to make it worse. And so that is exactly what's happening in every single field. Everybody's trying to make their mark. Nobody knows how to do it anymore because they're trying to do the same thing as people did in the past, but we're in a different environment. You got to figure out something new. Not like discover a new species, but like figure out something about that species that nobody's figured out. There's plenty of that to go around, but they don't want to do that because they don't know how to do that. And that you don't know how to do that without figuring out how to do that kind of thing because you're passionate about the field. Same thing with physics. You can't be a creative thinker and think outside the box about what really would be responsible for like the observation of extra mass in the universe. If you just assume that it's a particle that we haven't found yet, and we'll call it the graviton when we do, because that's what other people have assumed in the past, even though there's no evidence that that approach is working. Like, that's all everybody's doing. It's like, what's the potential particle that could be the graviton? Maybe it's, tachyons or something. It's like, maybe we just need to back up and think about like what is actually going on that could be potentially causing like the presence of extra gravity, that doesn't seem to be coming from the matter that we can observe. Like, maybe it's coming from the universe. Like, what would that mean? You have to be genuinely curious, and a good thinker in order to like start like backing up and reframing things. And people don't do that who are typically straight A students in school. People who do that usually get F, 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 C minus, C minus, B minus, B minus, which was my report card earlier. If you weren't watching the stream, I showed my report card from like 11th grade or something, and that was it. But I wanted to think, and I couldn't in school. But the problem is when school's giving out the credentials to people who are the best at not thinking. They're really intelligent and they're really good at figuring out how to do the best job that you can do at not thinking, which really means like memorizing the most amount of information as quickly as you possibly can, that other people are telling you is true, and parroting it. That's not the type of person that's going to actually figure out a new approach to and a new discovery in a field. They're just going to be like, okay, well, let's make a new species. And, because that's from that mountain range, because it's a little lighter colored. And, let's assume that maybe there's a particle that we haven't figured out yet, or observed yet, that like maybe it's a neutrino is dark matter. It's like, this is just the same old thing. It's the whole doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I don't even know if they're expecting a result. I think it's just like the incentives of the academic system. Everything is a proxy. You are a successful physicist nowadays if you publish a lot of papers, or if you're referenced in a lot of papers that are published, not because you have made some discovery or come up with an experiment that ended up being that you ended up being correct about, that was new and novel. It's like, no, that's not happening. It's just, how many papers are you in? And does the New York Times call you up when they want to talk about the multiverse? Okay. I mean, way back when, ages ago. The last great tech revolution humanity has overcome is the invention of the written word. Yeah, that's true. There, when I talked about on here, when Kurt Mungle said, like, what's the purpose? What's the use of like a consciousness first metaphysics framework? He was asking for like a technological use. He was like, where's your standard model predictions equivalent of the standard model that comes from your framework that leads to, us being able to have nuclear fission power plants. And the thing is that's a physical mechanism. But a consciousness first metaphysics framework will give you context that might allow for more physical technologies to be unlocked, but the primary use case of it would be social and mental technologies, which I think we're actually like invented. I think led to the creation of society itself. Marriage is the primary social technology that allows for the creation, the growth of society. It is economically efficient. It is productive, like biologically productive. It is uh, I mean, there's everything about it is just like, so you can't, it's just a requirement in, obviously, biologically to mate, and reproduce, but that's not the same thing as marriage. Marriage is so efficient that it allows for something to be created with the excess that it wouldn't be able to exist if you're just reproducing and not in having like the marriage structure form. It allowed for the creation of society. That's a social technology, and the written word is a technology that is kind of a personal technology and a social technology. And, even probably the 10 Commandments are rules that are kind of required to be followed by most people in order for society to also exist. It's like you can't have a society without it. People cannot live together if your neighbor steals your stuff and cheats with your wife. Like you will have murder taking place if that's in the circumstance. To have a peaceful society that continues on, you also need people to honor their elders and assume that there's wisdom to be learned from their elders, like honor their mother and father, to take care of their mother and father when they get old, and to listen to them when they're young. Like all of these things are requirements for society. They're social technologies. They're not just random rules. They're actually probably were deduced by people who had a sentience first metaphysics. And I think that those technologies are much, much more important than fission power plants and nuclear bombs and even jet engines, which are pretty cool. I'm a fan of jet engines, but I'm a bigger fan of the 10 Commandments and marriage, and even language. I mean, these are much more important things. You can't have any of these physical technologies without society. Society is the technology that they're built on. You need to have an information system that allows for the construction of information on discoveries of the past. And you can only do that in a society. You can't do that outside of a society. And you need certain social technologies to have a society. There's no science without marriage at all. You can't have society without it. There's no jet engines or automobiles or nuclear power without marriage. Or the basic assumption of the observation of the 10 Commandments, and as well. Like those are, you don't have to be a Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Mormon for this to be true. This is true for everyone. You cannot have a society where where it's normal for people to steal from each other and murder each other and not get married or cheat with another man's wife if they do get married. Like adultery is a very important, like the idea that adultery is immoral is a social technology. If you don't follow that, you will have people start murdering each other. Like that's what will happen. And society will fall apart. Like there's just no way to have it. So it's funny because when people say, what's the technology that you can unlock? It's like, it was unlocked, and every other technology is built on it. And we've actually not realized how critical a lot of those technologies are, and our society is falling apart because of it. But when something falls apart, it doesn't fall apart slowly over time where most people realize it. It falls apart so fast that you kind of feel that something's gone awry, and then all of a sudden everything is collapsed. That's like the the population collapse will be like that. It will be like, oh yeah, we're not having as much kids as we were in the past. Oh wow, there's so many more old people that and not enough young people to support them. And support society with labor. Like that's what builds society. And if everybody's old and a pyramid is stable because it is wider at the base than it is at the top. And if you have an inverted pyramid, it will collapse. And, a lot of these things are being very inverted, these technologies. We've forgotten what they were. Those are the accomplishments of a sentience first metaphysics framework. Like marriage. It's a discovery of marriage, not the creation necessarily. I mean, yeah, it's like kind of creation / discovery, but it's the discovery of what it can do. And but it is like a created technology. It's fascinating to me. That's the thing that drives me with this more than anything. I'm so much more interested in what kind of sentience first or fundamental theory, metaphysics framework or fundamental theory tell us about how to think, how to treat each other, why we're here, what our goals should be, what's right and wrong, and how to have a good society. Like that's what is more important than that. I'm not saying that there's nothing else that can come from it. I actually think that it could lead to the birthing of like an artificial general intelligence, which I hate that term. It's really a technological sentience, but it's not going to be from OpenAI or XAI or DeepMind. Like it's going to be from just the convergence of the right technologies that allow for the right degrees of freedom, which is like, for something to be embodied, someone basically to be embodied, which is different than just like Grok. And the sentient singularity theory, the framework of it allows you to realize that like what an agent is, what it would mean to be smart, what would it mean to be intelligent, and you have people who are so intelligent, like Elon Musk, saying the dumbest things, like AI is already smarter than your average person, and it will be way smarter than any person in 2 years. Grok will be way smarter than any person. It's already smarter than almost any person. It's like, what are you saying? Like, do you know what smart means? Like, it's not, I think you need to understand sentience and in order to understand what it means to think even. And so, which you need to understand in order to understand what it would mean to be actually intelligent, or actually smart, or actually an agent. And that's a very important thing, that it would be a very important thing for us to know. I think the majority of people are not going to realize it before it's already, we're already going down this path. The marketers have already taken on the name agent in AI, and you have ChatGPT agent, which means nothing. It's a marketing product term, and it's going to change the definition of agent. What happens when we change the definition of the word agent? Like, is that going to destroy our ability to understand ourselves? Is it going to destroy our ability to understand agency? What happens to morale, the idea of morals, when you don't have a proper definition of the word agency? I don't know, but probably not good things. Yeah. I'm not saying that's just because we have a physicalist metaphysics in our academic standard right now. That's mainly because marketing people are using words to name products that are confusing to people, because language is the control mechanism of this technology, these LLMs, where that's the first for us. That's spoken language is the actual like way of controlling something, and the way that it, not just the way of controlling something, but the way it interacts with you. You know, it's more important than ever that we understand what's sentience is, where it comes from, and what intelligence is, what it means to be smart, what an agent is. It's way more important than ever, or it's as important as ever. But we're in an environment now where it's more confusing than ever because of LLMs. And I mean but it will. I think sentient singularity theory and the perspective that it provides can help people who understand it navigate that. It's also frustrating because you'll see all the issues. You'll hear people say AI agents, and you'll be like, dude, that term doesn't. You just eliminated the word agent from the English language by calling these things AI agents. But we kind of did that already when we called it AI. AI could mean like it's fake intelligence. It's like imitative intelligence, or it could mean like technologically created intelligence. And people think it means technologically created intelligence, but really it's an imitative intelligence. But artificial means like man-made. So it's just that term in and of itself was just confusing to everyone. We should have called them dynamic network algorithms, and everybody would have understood what it was. But we don't, because marketing. And that's my job, is marketing. So I know, like, when I definitely know exactly what they're doing. I can see it. Like ChatGPT and Google and all these companies, they're, at the end of the day, they are selling you a product. And honestly, like, the product is you. Like, they're selling ourselves to ourselves. All of the intelligence that runs ChatGPT, or that optimizes ChatGPT's outputs to its prompts, and even the animation and updating that is constantly happening, is because it's taking information from us, and then it's spitting it back to us. That's exactly what Google did too. And it's not a bad thing, but like, it's still a product, and that they're selling us and trying to compete with competitors. You know, ChatGPT is trying to compete with Grok. Grok is trying to compete with ChatGPT. Grok is making it seem more like funny and have a better sense of humor, which is a lie, and confusing to people, just so that they can make it more entertaining to use than ChatGPT, even though it's making it, it's going to make people more confused about who is someone. And then, I mean, it is deceitful, like, to do that. I think, to try and make it seem funny. Like, I think it's deceitful. I mean, it's a problem. And, you know, Google jumped on all these social causes and stuff when to try and make society more focused on it than Bing. And it's like, Google didn't cure cancer like they basically promoted that they kind of would. Everybody kind of thought that was going to be the case. They were like going to solve all the world's problems, probably like 20 years ago. And really, they just since then I've made a shittier search engine. And Grok is going to do the same, and so is ChatGPT. And it's when you realize, like, when you start looking at systems, you realize that systems are about incentive structures, and you can't just make a change in the system without changing the incentive structure. It's like if you removed an animal from the wild, like if you hunted a, I don't know, or if you even moved an animal from one spot to a different spot, like these Burmese pythons that are loose in Florida that are now breeding in Florida. Congratulations. We have pythons now living in the United States. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Everybody that says it's a big deal and it's dangerous doesn't understand. There's alligators already in Florida. They're way more dangerous than pythons. And but like I remember people were saying they're gonna take over the entire United States, and with global warming, that could take over the entire U.S. And they introduced like projected maps from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife that there'd be pythons in like New York. And if they ever evolved to go live in New York, they would shrink to be the size of a garter snake. And like the systems and outcomes are about selective pressures and incentive structures. They are not, you can't just be like, okay, well now we've introduced pythons. It's like, well, the pythons are going to adapt to fit the environment that they're in. Or you go and you remove a species from an ecosystem. Something else will come in and fill its niche. You know, there's species that fill. There's no vipers in Australia, but there is a species of snake called the death adder that is technically an elapid, which is like cobras and mambas. It's just a group of snakes, of venomous snakes, that looks and acts exactly like a viper. It sits and waits for its prey, and it strikes super fast, and it's not like cruising around like a mamba. It sits and waits, and it has a triangular head. Like it looks like a rattlesnake almost. Because this is not about like whether or not there's vipers in Australia. There's the equivalent, because this is about incentive structures and selective pressures. So is society. You cannot change it without changing incentive structures and selective pressures. That's why you can't improve school by changing the curriculum. It's not about the curriculum. And I don't know how you can improve school without, eliminating lawyers and that are going to make, and insurance companies that are basically going to like not allow for people to have any real experiences while they're in school because they're trying to avoid a lawsuit. But the thing is like, how do you eliminate those without eliminating people? You can't. So you kind of just have to find a new model to these things. And this is like when I hear Eric Weinstein, he's constantly talking about like saving the institutions. It's like, dude, it's not about like who's teaching or who is the president of the university or what the curriculum is. It's about all the incentive structures behind it that are just going to manifest the exact same patterns if you change the people. Our social technologies that are the best change the incentive structures. Your incentive structures when you're married are totally different than when you're single. Totally different. Your world is different. Your goals are different. Your what you want is different. Your worries and your concerns are different. It changes the incentive structures. And there is no such thing as a social technology that doesn't do that. It's a change of us and how we interact. It's fascinating to think about. I'm going to go to the chat because I know I've been ignoring it. I'm starting to think, I'm going to wrap it up actually. Starting to think that, oh man, I love it. No. Shows are in science. I'm starting to think that an event horizon may just be a 2D plane between phase something. I don't know what you're trying to say. An event horizon is just the limit to your ability to perceive. That's what an event, think about the term event horizon. An event is something that you perceive. It is a circumstance that you perceive. That's an event. Something happens, you see it, an event. That's an event. And I have a video called Space-Time in the Observerse that I made that wasn't live, and it's one of the earlier videos on this channel. I recommend watching that, and it starts off with me talking about like an event and what it is. And just an event horizon is just the limit to your ability to perceive an event. It's like a black hole. It's the same thing. It's just black, just meaning like you can't see it, you know. People say it swallows light and everything, but like, yeah, you can't perceive into it. That's the event horizon of a black hole is just beyond your perception. You know, it's interesting because when you're traveling at supersonic speed in a jet, you'll produce a sonic boom and everybody else will hear it, but you, because you're moving faster than the sonic boom. So you'll never hear the sonic boom. Like the people who rode the Concorde never heard the sonic boom. If you were underneath the Concorde, you felt the sonic boom. Allegedly, I had never felt it. I've only seen a Concorde once that was still operating. I remember being very young, seeing one at like JFK Airport, just waiting at a terminal, thinking it was the coolest thing ever. But we don't have those anymore. It's like we don't have supersonic jet transportation anymore. We used to. You know, that was a masterpiece of engineering. We don't have that because the incentive structures don't promote that. They promote efficient and safe, the safest and the most efficient, fuel efficient aircraft, and quiet. And so that's what we've got. But like, think about if we don't even have the incentive structures anymore to support a supersonic commercial aircraft. And I know they're trying to make some new private ones, like supersonic private planes. But we'll see. Then why you wonder why we haven't gone back to the moon? Of course we haven't gone back to the moon. It's so dangerous. The risk, like if you're the president when a moon mission fails and everybody dies, like you're always going to be remembered as that president. That was the president when, you know, when the Apollo 20, you know, crashed into the moon. Like, nobody wants that. Every single president, while I've been alive, has stated that when they took office that they were recommitting NASA to taking us back to the moon, and that they were, you know, putting funding towards it. And when you look at what they were actually like pushing, it was these things that wouldn't even be able to get us to the moon anyways. And they're just posturing to the people. Everybody wants to be the guy that says we're going to the moon. Nobody wants to be the guy who actually is the president when that happens, because it could fail. People were way less risk averse back in the day than they are today. And part of that is just the publicity of everything. You know, you can go viral on social media for airing a terrible report card, a picture of a terrible report card from when you were in middle school. And like, you know, what happens when something goes public and somebody dies in some, you know, event that everybody was hoping would go well, and it took like 8 to 10 years of planning and billions of dollars, and it all just goes up in smoke. I remember Mark Zuckerberg had put like $50 million or something, or $250 million even maybe, into some satellite that was supposed to bring communication to Africa or something. And they put it in a SpaceX rocket, and SpaceX is pretty reliable, their Falcon 9, but this one was not. And it was one of the few that actually failed. And it just was sitting on the launch pad and just exploded. And it was such an expensive endeavor that whatever it was, Mark Zuckerberg just abandoned it. And it's not like he made a second satellite. It was like $250 million or something like that. And what do? You can't be like, okay, well, let's try again. Like, no, let's move on. That was a total waste of time, of, a decade and $250 million. Imagine that there's people on that. I'm starting to think of it. Hacking radiation placing itself far away reminds me of it. I think gravity is still electromagnetic based on emotion, but more like a plasma nuclear based, almost static like motion. Mass based on large stuff compressed, Lorentz law, and relativity. Gravity is the universe moving. You imagine you are the universe and a cell in your body is you inside the universe. Everything and every cell in your body is moving and you are moving as a whole entity as well. That's probably what is responsible for even the perception of dark matter, is that there's movement coming from the universe itself, and it's translating to the perception of extra gravity that doesn't seem to correspond with observable matter within the universe. And so it's basically, what that means is there's extra movement, if you want to think about like what it means, what dark matter really is. It's not matter that we just can't see or haven't found yet. It is that there's movement that is happening that doesn't seem to, that is being able to be kind of measured, but that doesn't seem to be coming from any specific structures inside the universe. That's really what dark matter is. It just means that there's extra gravity, and that isn't accounted, doesn't seem to come from, all the mass that we can observe added up, all the matter that we can perceive. That what gravity is movement. It's force, and force comes from movement. And so that's what's happening. There's extra movement. What is it? Maybe it's the universe itself, like if you're moving, your cells would see their world bending around them. Like that's how they would experience it. It would be kind of like, changes in gravity here, and how we think of general relativity. It would be a very similar of an experience. But it's hard because like you don't actually pick up on the experience. You have to kind of conceive of the experience of different gravitational circumstances in the universe. Like if you're closer to a black hole, time, slows down for you. But like there's no change in your perception. You're just still perceiving causality in as it relates to you. And so you can only like conceive of it. You can't really perceive it, which just makes it even more confusing. But it's really, this is all about movement. There's extra movement that doesn't seem to be things inside the universe moving. Oh, I wonder what it is. Well, maybe it's the actual universe also moving. That's my theory on dark matter. I'm pretty sure it's correct. I don't know what you can do with that information. You can't I don't think it allows you to make, teleportation or warp transportation. Maybe, but I don't really, it's not my focus. Where are you going to go? Eric Weinstein was on trigonometry recently, and I would love to have Eric on here one day. I think that would be an amazing conversation. And I respect him immensely. I think geometric unity is a really onto something, and is a better piece of theoretical physics than any mainstream proposal that's out there. It's uh, that has been proposed by any PhD in physics that you can think of off the top of your head. And that said, he said he's hoping apparently that geometric unity unlocks the ability to overcome or escape the constraint of space-time, of relativity. And I actually think that geometric unity probably can do that and basically allow you to go from one moment or one location to another, or one time to another, maybe even basically one moment to another, in a way that isn't constrained by space. And he thinks this is a necessary thing for us to be able to go to different planets throughout the entire universe and be able to spread out, so that if some, nuclear war happens and some people destroy a planet, like, it doesn't destroy us all. I don't think that is actually like a requirement for saving humanity. God's will be done. And I think there's a plan and a process in place already for what the universe is evolving into. And it doesn't, I don't think we need to like spread out, or else we will destroy ourselves. But I'm a much bigger, like, I assume that a wisdom explosion eventually will be the salvation of humanity. Basically where everybody all of a sudden is able to be in a circumstance in which they're much wiser. Their circumstances are decided from a perspective of wisdom, much greater wisdom than currently is the case. And for another day, we can talk about it. But I also don't think we'll destroy all of humanity with nukes. We're already destroying, society's already falling apart. We don't ever need to launch a nuke. There's so many other things in society that are destroying it, that would destroy it, if it wasn't for I think an inevitable black swan event that will eventually occur. But he thinks that we need to like spread out and go to the stars. And I don't see how that makes any sense, because human nature is would be responsible for all the things that destroy a society. And human nature follows humans anywhere humans go. It's not that some people are stupid enough to destroy society and some people are not. It's just a matter of eventually someone's going to make the wrong call, and it's going to have dramatic consequences that are awful. And I think that happens more often than we even realize. I mean, like, the destruction of our social technologies is already destroying us. We don't even need nukes to do it, like physical technologies to do it. If people aren't having children and aren't getting married and aren't staying married, and there's going to be no society to even blow up. Like, I'm not a doomer. We're gonna be fine, but we're in for some rough times. But I don't understand how he doesn't realize, like, that you can't escape human nature just by overcoming the constraints of space-time. In fact, it probably makes it less of a buffer, because now space has been eliminated as a buffer. Now it doesn't take 30 minutes to get a bomb from one side of the world to the other. It takes 0 minutes to get a bomb from one side of the universe to the other. Like, that doesn't sound like and your human nature is still the same. You didn't change it. Remember, incentive structures and selective pressures, not like individuals. So you haven't changed the incentive structures of the selective pressures, other than you've eliminated even some type of short-term temporal buffer of like 30 minutes, to get into the shelter or something. It's like, now, no, you just could send a nuke from here to Mars or here to Alpha Centauri in no time, not in a minute, not in a second, in no time. And I actually think geometric unity might allow for this, but I don't think that it would save us either. uh, even though he thinks it would. I'd love to talk to him about it, but that would take some bravery on his part, because I think I have a pretty good argument against why that would save us. But at the same time, I'm also one of the view that would probably believe that his work might actually unlock the ability to do what he, thinks it might. So it's a weird spot to be in. But yeah, his latest interview was with Trigonometry. It was like about, the headline was, is this the end of the world? And no, it's not. An inverted diamond cut is a pattern. I like the idea of social technologies. It is. Social technologies are the primary fruit of a correct sentience first metaphysical framework, which is a theistic framework. It's the same thing. Just one of those terms triggers people. Starship Earth. LLM acts on our behalf. LLM is, yeah, exactly. If agentic, it can do other things other than language, like call tools. Yeah, that's not agentic. That's just multimodal. That's what I'm saying. It's like the term that it's AI agents, they're just multimodal dynamic network algorithms. You had a single mode dynamic network algorithm to now a multimodal dynamic network algorithm. That's it. It's not. That's not what agentic means. Agentic means the ability to have agency, which is you must have personal will in order to have agency. You have to have will of your own. The LLMs have no will of their own. They are entirely animated by people who have will. Gravity is my God. Gravity, the perception of gravity is I think the perception of God's movement of us, and a movement of himself. Gravity is not God. God is someone. Gravity is what we see. It's probably like one of the most clear pictures that we can get of God from the inside. Imagine you're a cell inside a body and you're trying to see the human that you're inside of. You can't, but you can feel the forces of that human moving while you're inside it. That's gravity. So gravity is not God, but gravity is what we see when we're looking at God from the inside out. Okay, I've had it, friend. I don't know if you're talking to me. Entropy is Gravatar's motive. Event horizon, sorry, needed glasses. 2D change. I can't think of anything that would make a phase change like an event horizon. I don't know what you mean. I'm guessing that there is more to the moon than we are told, and risk management is far too risky. I am a relativity and firmament fan. I just saying, in Jesus' name, I hope we all learn one day. Fair enough. I don't think that the president, when I think of the president, when I think of the Challenger. Yeah, but that's because that president didn't create, that was Reagan, I think, but he didn't create the space shuttle. I don't think he did. Okay. Nixon directed the NASA to build the space shuttle. And it was Reagan, I think. Yep, Reagan was the president during the Challenger explosion. So it wasn't him. It wasn't him that directed the space shuttle. It was Nixon. And I bet you we would all really, really remember that it was Nixon if, like, the first space shuttle that people went up in while Nixon was president exploded and everybody died. Like, that they would cancel the program probably after that. Um, and we would all remember that like Nixon had this failed space shuttle that everybody died in. But the first, for a while it was successful and it was working. They just had, 2 accidents. It was Challenger and Columbia. And but those nobody you can't like there was no president that like initiated this space shuttle that was president when those things happened. I've lived my life with the wish of Clipper mission. Should they get the next rover to Titan? I am like fascinated by the what is it? Oh my gosh. I'm just having a brain fart. It was the Project Orion, where basically it was a spaceship that just had an abrasive like shock absorber on one side, and they would just drop nukes out the back like it was pooping nukes, and then they would just explode the nukes one after the other successively to accelerate this thing, to a fraction of the speed of light. And what an insane idea. And like physically like possible, but so impractical and inefficient, because where are you going to put like all the nukes that you need for this operation? But also just so unnecessary. It was, it's just a product of like the 60s and 50s, where just people unlocked way more power than they were used to having, and they did some crazy. They proposed some super crazy things with it, but also did some crazy things with it, like the Valkyrie, what is it, the XB-70 Valkyrie bomber that we built. Well, we built 2 prototypes. They never used them. One of them crashed during a GE commercial, and everybody died. It was awful, and they caught it all on film. But it was the fastest bomber ever made. It has 6 enormous engines. This thing was, I think, the second fastest manned plane to ever be disclosed. And like this is something they would never build today. XB-70 Valkyrie. They canceled it because anti-aircraft missiles got too advanced anyways. They would have taken it out. But look at this thing. They don't build things like this anymore. Look at the size of this plane. This plane went faster than 3 times the speed of sound. It rode its own shockwave that it created. It had 6 enormous engines in the back. Look at that. That's a person next to one engine. There's 6 of them. People wonder, why we haven't, if we went to the moon in the first place, why haven't we gone back? Dude, we made this thing and we don't make things like this anymore. We made the Concorde. We don't make things like that anymore. Like the moon issue is going to the moon. It's an aerospace like project. There was way crazier aerospace projects back when we were going to the moon, like this. Nothing is like this anymore. We don't even fly the SR-71 anymore. Anything that goes super fast now, like they're making an SR-72 right now, Lockheed Martin, and it supposedly is supposed to go like Mach 6 or something. It's unmanned. It's like they're not going to stick a man in that. Why? What's the point? You don't have to, and you don't have to risk anybody's life. You don't have to add unnecessary complexity. You don't have to add a bunch of extra weight. You don't have to put anybody's life in danger. And you can sacrifice it if need be, in a mission. So, but it makes everything so much less exciting if there's no man in it. Like a plane is, the coolest planes will always have people in them. You can make a drone that goes Mach 10, and if nobody's inside of it, And they already have done that, by the way. I think they've made like little test hypersonic test planes that went like Mach 9. NASA tested them, but there's no one in it. And so it's like, nobody cares, you know? You don't even think of it as an airplane, because an airplane is a vehicle. It's not, that's like a drone. It's just it's like a model, basically. It's a tool, but still. Aerospace technology is going to just continue to get way less and less cool. Other than maybe Elon Musk's big rocket that, if it ends up taking people back to the moon. But other than that, that's probably the last cool, like super cool manned aerospace project that is really going to be like boundary pushing as far as capability, not just be cool, like, you know, a new fighter jet or something, which they are making. But it's just a stealthier fighter jet, you know? It's not like it's going Mach 10 and, you know, the size of a football field. Everything is emotion, yes. I think dark matter should be not referred to as matter at all. Yeah, it shouldn't. It should not. The term is wrong. If I'm right, then the term is wrong. It should not be called dark matter. It should be, it's just the movement of the universe itself. It's God moving, basically. It should not be called dark matter. It should be called like universal movement or something, you know? I think that we might be inside of a black hole universe. It's all phase changes. I don't know what that means when you say that. Like, what is a black hole? What is a phase change? I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, these terms, I think, have done more to distract us than to define things for us. That's why I'm so, like, adamant about, like, Sentient Singularity Theory. The name is so important because it is definitional. It's not a placeholder name. Black hole is a placeholder name. Dark matter is a placeholder name. Multiverse is basically even like a placeholder name. And Big Bang, placeholder name. Big Crunch, placeholder name. All of this stuff is. Ether, placeholder name. What is happening? That's what I think we need to start thinking about. Not like that there's gravity there. It's like, okay, but what is gravity really? It's motion. That's what it is. Something's moving. When things are moving in space, within the universe, we see it as gravity that is associated with mass of matter. When we're perceiving gravity that isn't associated with mass of observable matter, it's probably the movement of space, not in space, of space itself, like as a whole. So, you know, these terms are very much made to be memorizable in an academic context. Gravity, black hole, Big Bang. What's happening? That's what we need to start thinking about. Thank you so much. I'm at my limit for staying. Cheers, folks. Much love. Stay awesome. Good chat. Thank you for being here. I'm going to wrap it up. So I've reached my limit too. It is too easy now to attack each other. Yeah. People in prison, you know, now shit just got real. Does anyone now 8 days even know? How long is a day really? Kurchai Mongol posted on Twitter today something like, every single day of your life is 24 hours long, except your first and your last. And like, I was like, that's pretty interesting, actually. But and then I started thinking about, you know, why does it really matter that things are 24 hours, and what happens when you live in a place like I do where we have daylight savings time, we basically like lose an hour. You know, my day is like, what, 23 hours, something like that. And then I just gave up. And I moved on. Anyways, thank you, everybody. I hope this was interesting. I really just wanted to like think out loud with you guys and kind of just talk about what it means to think and why people aren't anymore, and why thinking is not thinking properly and actually thinking is not necessarily the same thing always as stating the right answer. But it is also the only way to know that your answer is the right answer. So with that, please hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know what you think of the new thumbnail design, or if I should change it back or find a new one in the comments. So peace, everyone. Thanks.